Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Bernie Boudreau, Executive Director of Serve Rhode Island. If you can remember far enough back and are a frequent viewer of this show, you may remember Bernie on at least one other time. So I have to say welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me back.
So for those who may not be familiar with it, tell everybody what Serve Rhode Island is.
Serve Rhode Island is Rhode Island's state commission for national service, which means we administer the AmeriCorps program. We have about 280 Corps members in about 12 programs. And we're also the volunteer center for the state. So we coordinate all volunteer activities for the state. We have an online website that basically people can match their interests with what's available out there in the nonprofit community. And we make matches for thousands of people every year.
So people probably have heard of AmeriCorps, but get into a little bit more detail about what that is.
AmeriCorps is a government program. We like to call it the Domestic Peace Corps. It's a year of service, can be renewed for another year or 2 years. And basically people give a year of service full-time. They get a stipend, which is a little less than minimum wage. And they get when they complete their year of service, they get a $5,500 grant for education, for continuing their college or whatever. The kind of service they do can range from working in schools to in the community, health programs, disaster response, and environmental stewardship, also, wide range of public service kind of work.
So you mentioned disaster response. One of the things I knew we were going to talk about today is, response. For example, when Superstorm Sandy rolled around, you were intricate in responding. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think people anticipate a storm, but not until it's passed you realize how devastating it was. And the people in Mesquamacut and Westerly were really devastated.
Really bad, yeah.
Compared to New Jersey, in New York, it wasn't the same scale, but for that mile of waterfront, it was just as bad in terms of the number of the buildings that got destroyed, and the sand that got lifted into the streets. There was about 6 feet of sand on Atlantic Avenue.
The stop signs had the sand up to their neck. You could stand on a pile of sand and the stop sign was almost buried. That's how high the sand was on Atlantic Avenue
and,
there.
No one could go down there, so the storm hit, at the beginning of the week or the weekend. And then we put, with United Way 2-on-1, we put the call out for volunteers the Friday before the storm hit. And by the following Friday, we had 250 volunteers ready to come in and help out. Problem was that the whole waterfront was closed down for security reasons. And
how do you help if you can't gain access to it?
So we went down to the Emergency Operations Center, which gets set up at the Westerly Police Department. And the town manager was there, and the fire chief, the Westerly police chief, FEMA, REMA, everybody. And I just waited my turn. I said, we have 250 volunteers, can be here tomorrow if you want.
It was like dog's ears popping up when you said that?
Yeah, partly like, no, we don't want volunteers in there.
Oh,
that was one reaction. Yeah. And really from Caswell Cook, who's on the council.
Who was pretty much spearheading a lot of what was going on down there.
He said, come talk to me.
Yeah.
I said, we'll come up with a plan. And the issue was, we don't want a lot of cars down there. There's no place for them. There's heavy equipment. It's dangerous, right?
But a guy who lives right there and has a business there, he knew the need to be able to have these volunteers.
So we came up with a plan of, why don't we have people go to the Rotary Park, which is about 1.5 miles, maybe a couple miles from Mesquamacut Beach, out on close to Route 1, and then we'll bus people in on a school bus. So that's what we did, starting that weekend for the next 8 weeks, 8 weekends.
Yeah, a lot of hard work was put in by a lot of great volunteers.
And because when a wave destroys a building, it splinters the woods. There's nails and glass, and it costs everything, all the contents that are in the building, like cans of paint and gasoline, and all detergents and everything imaginable. So safety orientation was very important, and we had over 1,400 volunteers by the end of our effort, which actually ended last week. We finished our project on the pond, and I'll tell you about that in a minute.
Right.
But almost 10,000 hours, volunteer hours, over 1,400 volunteers, individual volunteers, pitched in to help out, and they did an amazing job.
They sure did.
And the cooperation with the town, and like I said, Caswell Cook and other people, it was just amazing effort.
And we've had so many different shows that we've done that were related in some way to what you were just talking about. We've had Caswell on himself, being the director of the Mesquamaket business area, talking about the recovery and cleanup. Right. And we've also we just did a show with 211. You mentioned them. Right. I got to give credit to the fine folks, those businesses down there at Mesquamaket, for getting back on the horse, so to speak. They've rebuilt, they've opened for the season. Now their livelihood depends on it, so it's understandable that they would need to get going too. But great credit to them for getting it on there. The disaster, and you wanted to talk about the pond that's across the street.
Well, it's a beautiful salt pond, and Rhode Island's southern coast has a number of them, Ninigret and some of the others. And it's not that navigable. I mean, there's a lot of stones and rocks in it and stuff like that. You can get around on what do you call them? The little ski-doos or whatever you call them.
But this thing just got filled in from the storm. Right?
Well, what happened was this tidal surge carried all the broken debris, and everything floated. And there was a lot of metal too that was on top of wood, so it all floated to the other side of the pond, which is great. The pond was not infiltrated with all kinds of debris, but the very sensitive wildlife sanctuary and that whole area for about 3/4 of a mile, we estimated it was 100 tons of debris. And it was just all in there in the reeds. And there's a trail that comes off Shore Road. That's the Audubon property, and it goes down to the pond. And then there's another trail. But generally, it's hard to get stuff from that pond edge out to Shore Road. So we, a John Deere tractor supplier, Mark Johnson there in Wakefield, lent one of his bigger tractors, and the Chamber of Commerce lent their trailer. So we were trailering out piece by piece, load by load. Everything that we pulled out of there was picked up by hands.
And I would imagine that one of the concerns before you had the volunteers even go in there in the first place were safety issues too, concerns.
Totally, yeah, I was the first one to step on a nail.
Were you really? Wow.
So that made me acutely aware of safety.
Yeah.
But, really good working boots, good gloves, and because the boards and everything were so piled up, it was easy to kind of step through them, and the reeds were bent over, so a lot of it was hidden. So it was very dangerous. So we took our time, and we had no serious injuries, which is great. People got some scratches. A few other people stepped on nails. And we actually, by the end of last week, we had removed 80 tons. 80
Amazing.
tons.
And you know that every single grain of sand had to be filtered and then put back on the beach and things like that because of whatever the environmental issues
So at
were.
the end of November, if you drove down that area, the whole State Beach parking lot was
Piles
pile
of sand,
upon pile of sand.
Yep.
Each pile probably 25 feet high.
And the irony is that just recently they did their Spring Fest there, and that's where all the carnival rides and everything are. So they got it all cleared out.
They did.
And not everything is back functioning normal. Some things are what they call in stages. It's interesting because it's old. A lot of the buildings were grandfathered, and when they had to rebuild, you're talking about new code that have to be adhered to.
New code, but some of the like the landscaping and everything, it was just really destroyed.
Yeah.
So
dunes.
For example, we had a team, kind of an elite AmeriCorps team called the National Civilian Community Corps. So we were granted a team for about 6 weeks.
Is this with more training and experience?
Yeah, they're part of the AmeriCorps, but they're in teams and they go around the country working on disaster response. And so they get trained in a lot of first aid and safety and chainsaw use and all that kind of thing. Probably even young men and young women. I mean, and what a team they were. They've actually finished up the job in Winnipeg, and there was a part of the pond, you can see it in some of the slides, where it was too far to walk the debris. So the Exeter Job Corps, which is a Department of Labor training program for young people, built a raft. I designed a raft by 4x8 sections, 2 of them, and we bolted them together, capable of carrying 2 tons. So at first we were walking the raft through the water to get it from the side, and then we had to power it around the point. Now there's a point there in the pond that there's boulders all over the place. So nobody would would let us use their boat.
Yeah,
and I understand why.
You're just asking for
Yeah.
trouble.
Except my good friend, Bill Flynn, who's the director of the Senior Agenda, another person I talked to sometime, he said, well, use my boat. That's what it's there for, you know. So you got a 14-footer with a little 9.9 motor. And I had only been on a boat a few times. And so anyway, I got my sea legs real quick. And we did about we did 8 trips around that point, finished it up. And it was just a major victory. And, you know, at the end, when we went to go get the tools, we came out to the end of the trail, and all these birds were all lined up, these, you know, at the end of the marsh, as if to say thank you.
Yeah,
that was
great. I hope somebody
yeah.
got a picture of that
I
moment.
did, actually.
Good.
You can see some of the birds in my photograph.
Either that or they were saying, you want to keep speeding up here because we want to get back to business here too. That's
Yeah.
great. You know, and that's just, you know, a couple of examples of the fine folks and just people, regular, everyday people willing to volunteer their time and their backsides to helping out a good cause disasters.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a couple there. That's, you know, superstorms and hurricanes and floods. And we can go to the opposite time of the year when a blizzard came through and people needed to be dug out of their homes and their driveways and their front porches. Yeah. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that was sort of something that we have never really done before. We had a blizzard. It was horrible, but it was bad.
I like how you put it in quotes. A blizzard, you know.
Kind of a big
Hey,
snowstorm.
it was big. I mean, for a day, nobody could get out of their driveway.
Well, I remember 78.
Okay.
Everything, there's no blizzard unless it's like
You got to compare it to 78, right?
But we got together with United Way 211 and said, you know, why don't we try organizing some young folks to go out there and help shovel out? And it was sort of an afterthought because the snow hit, I think, Saturday and Sunday. By middle of Sunday, there was some sheltering going on and stuff. And I said, let's put the call out. So we have a list of volunteers, about 10,000, you know, that we just put the word out and say, if you're fit and, you know, in shape.
Yeah, because you don't want to ask somebody to be.
And we'd like to help shovel out someone who's elderly or disabled. And we got 55 volunteers. Many of them did several jobs.
Wow. They had to dig themselves out first and then go to somebody else's.
And they did 119 homes. And, you know, it was all based on trust. And we'll do it next time there's a problem with snow and weather. But we'll probably have people team up in teams of 2.
That makes sense,
yeah.
and that's
A lot
smart.
of people by themselves, and
Yeah.
one guy, he burnt out his snowblower.
No
He
kidding.
did about 20,
Wow.
20 driveways, and at the very last one, it just, you know.
It knew its
cracked.
job was done, and it said, that's it. I'm officially retiring.
But it's the goodwill of people. It's just amazing, you know. And I think in the line of work that I'm in, you know, working with volunteers and that sort of community spirit, and especially a lot of young people with the AmeriCorps programs, you just see the goodness of people,
It's a real rewarding aspect of your job
Sure is.
to be able to, not only to help people, but to see your people, your volunteers, just be willing to not ask for anything in return, but just go out and help their fellow individual.
And, you know, there are a lot of great groups that come in from out of state, but they have a lot of rules. Like they'll only work on owner-occupied residences. They won't work on places where people are renting.
What's the reason for that? Because of the
Well,
legalities involved in it?
Part of their, you know, their charitable
Liability?
limitations. Yeah, some of it's got to do with just they don't want to be supporting a sort of an absentee landlord, for example.
Okay,
or-
he should be out there taking care of the
Yeah, I
property.
suppose, you know, but in the situation of Misquamicut where
Yeah.
everybody's devastated,
Yep.
there's the business owners and there's the you know, vacation property owners and there's everybody else. There's the residents. There are some tenants there. We helped everybody.
Yep.
You know, and we did a lot with the businesses, and they really appreciated it. So much so that when I needed a place for the NCCC team to stay, we had 7 of them. They gave us a deeply discounted rate.
Nice.
I refused to accept it for nothing because I knew they needed the money back into their
Sure.
businesses. And we had gotten some money from the Red Cross. The Red Cross, as you know, is the first organization everyone thinks of. In the case of Rhode Island, a lot of money was raised for the Red Cross to work in Rhode Island, but they couldn't spend it all because of how they work. A lot of it went to more needy places like New Jersey and New York. But what they did was, for the first time that I can recall, they re-granted the money. So we got a grant from them a couple months ago, which helped us sustain our effort.
And another show we did recently was FEMA, and they were in the conversation. Well, obviously, when it comes to disaster areas, they're not necessarily. They even explained they're not necessarily the first responders. The local people are the first responders, and then once the governor,
the FEMA's the money,
right?
I mean,
really, that's what it comes down to.
And they were very cooperative. There's a town planner in Wesley, Amy Grabowski. She's got a background in emergency response, but she works closely with the manager. She coordinated arrangements with all kinds of government entities and Coastal Resources Management, Department of Environmental Management, FEMA, Rhode Island Emergency Management, you name it. And with FEMA, they are under the gun to make sure they're very efficient and they're not belaboring anything.
Right.
So
they had some bad press back in the
she
Katrina days.
negotiated with them. We had a meeting with the FEMA people back in January and say, this is a volunteer effort, so we can't go in there with heavy equipment and get all this stuff pulled out in a short period of time. It's going to take us a few months. And they understood that, and what they did was pay for the tipping fees of the 30-yard dumpsters that we had out on Shore Road. So all the stuff had to come up from a quarter-mile path, like I said, using a lawn tractor, and then into a dumpster. And that's how we amassed 80 tons of it. Yeah.
And the FEMA people, they don't necessarily deal with businesses more so than just private individuals, right? As far as the money goes.
I wouldn't pretend to be an expert
Yeah.
at that. They may have programs for businesses. I think it's mostly residential support.
Right.
But they perform very well. They were really good.
And this is not me blowing smoke here, but whenever you hear about an executive director of any organization who's out there with his own hands, stepping on nails and picking up debris, you really have a passion for your work, don't you?
Well, I do.
Mm-hmm. Not that anybody wants to necessarily,
But we're a small organization. We have a staff of 6.
You're wearing lots of hats, aren't you?
Yeah, so, and we have 4 AmeriCorps Vistas, so we essentially have 10 people that can get everything done. So we have to have a sort of, everybody that is on our staff has to be multi-skilled.
Yeah.
Everyone can swing a paintbrush, climb a ladder. Not everyone can use a chainsaw yet, but I had 4 on my team, including me, go through asbestos training because asbestos is in the environment.
Especially the old buildings and stuff where that's all sitting in there.
We do a lot of work in schools and nonprofits, and so we have to be aware and smart. But that's kind of the fun of the job too. I don't desire a job where I'm sitting behind the computer all day, or running around to meetings all the time in a suit. It's fun. There's one of those photographs with me actually powering the motorboat. And I had a blast doing that. There were some hairy moments though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the type of job where you are. There's something different going on all the time. That because of where we are, I guess in the Northeast and New England, and because weather is such an issue, we spent more than half the show talking about helping out volunteers, disaster relief. But it's just a fact of life, isn't it?
It is. There are different opinions about global warming. Something's going on with our weather systems.
Climate,
they're bigger storm systems. Just the rain we got from the lingering tropical storm was a lot of rain. So I think this is going to be an annual kind of something.
Right.
We're going to be dealing with Irene. The damage was limbs, downed limbs and trees and stuff like that. A lot of power outages. So we had an NCCC and AmeriCorps team come in. All of them were chainsaw experts. And they cut.
You were on maybe a couple of years ago or so, and being a nonprofit, is life or the ability to just function as a nonprofit, is it different now than it was a couple of years ago, as far as your ability to raise money, generate funds, write grants, help get the volunteers, that sort of thing?
From my vantage point, the volunteer growth has been strong. Funding support for our organization has been difficult. I think there are other nonprofits that are dealing with more directly with basic human needs that in bad economic times, I think donors, want to help those folks first, and I totally understand that. I used to run the food bank in Rhode Island, and, I understood that. So supporting the Volunteer Center, for one thing, if you're a volunteer center, people assume we're all volunteers. Well, I'm not. You know, it has to be professionally run organization.
Right, so it has to function.
Exactly. We have systems, we have, plans, strategies, whatever, MOUs with different agencies. So, yeah, we could use some support if you have any of your kind and generous listeners out there,
Yeah, our viewers are individuals, but how about corporate help support? Do you get that too?
Well, we've got a new development in our work with corporations. For example, Fidelity Investments, headquartered in Smithfield, Rhode Island. Actually, a lot of places, I guess, but they have 3,500 employees in Smithfield. This will be the 4th year in a row that they do something called a Transformation Day, which is they'll take 300 or 400 of their employees and work in one of the oldest and most beleaguered urban schools in Rhode Island. So we've been in Roger Williams Middle School. In a few weeks, we're going to be at the Samuel Slater School in Pawtucket, and they really prepare for this. So we get expert painters and people that can do landscaping, who work inside and outside the building, and for that kind of work, they pay us for our services. They pay us like a contract fee. So contract for services is sort of what we're getting into, and
it helps with funding, right?
Yeah, it's funding. It helps pay my salary and my staff. We have to get a number of those lined up in order to kind of complete the whole budget for the year. And the challenge there is to get the right price for the amount of effort. I mean, and I think that's always hard to judge.
A general question, and this isn't just in terms of in the wake or the aftermath of disasters, but we talked about you as a nonprofit a couple of years later. What about the state of Rhode Island in general?
Oh boy,
is that too much complicated of a question?
Well, no. I mean, I think it's struggling along, and URI Professor Ladaro just came out and said, well, I think we've hit a sort of a lull in recovery from the recession. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I think there's
it's
a lot of...
It's very gradual.
It's very gradual, and I think, we're a kind of older New England economy. We, trying to make that transition from an industrial base to a service base to a knowledge-based economy. We're a small state, so, you don't have to go far to work in Rhode Island, but live in Massachusetts or in Connecticut. So I think that's one of our just physical disadvantages.
Before we run out of time, I want you to mention the Serve Rhode Island website, because I'm sure that's a very valuable resource to people to go and find what they are looking for.
Yeah, it's a good website. It's 3 W's, right? And then Serve Rhode Island, all spelled out. ServeRhodeIsland.org.
And what's on the website for people to go and see?
Well, the link to our volunteer connection portal, so that you can go in there and put in your interests, where you want to work, the kind of work you want to do, and there'll be a number of matches that come up.
So depending on your skill set, right?
Yeah, and you can call us up and we walk you through that process, or you can do totally on your own. There's information about volunteerism. There's information about some of the studies we've done on that. There's links to a lot of different things, a lot of interesting video that we've done. We've done about 60 kind of YouTube videos that that capture the essence of our work, and I'm working on now one now that sort of captures the story of the volunteer response to Hurricane Sandy. And as you know, you got to make it brief.
Yeah.
So you want to, 3 hours later, people aren't going to be watching.
No.
So.
It's not you're sitting in a theater watching a movie. This is quick. But yeah, so there's lots of resources available if you're interested in volunteering, or maybe some kind of financial support or whatever. There's just lots you can learn on the website. So please go and check it out. You won't be disappointed. Bernie Boudreau, the Executive Director of Serve Rhode Island, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. We'll need to have you back more often.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of For the Record. You can see this show and many others on our YouTube site. In the meantime, we will see you next time. I'm Sean Murphy. Take care.